Welcome to Prevue InFocus Live, co-sponsored by iMeet. We're all very excited. We're starting a new venture today, a monthly series of webinar seminars devoted to the meeting and incentive industry, or MICE industry. We have in our audience almost 200 participants from all over the world, and we're excited to start with a very wonderful panel with great depth and experience in the international arena. I have a couple of announcements first to make. We'll have a chance at the end of the program for some questions and answers, so if you have questions throughout the program, feel free to write them down and submit them. They'll be condensed if there are several alike into a question, then we'll read those on the air to the panelists. Also, iMeet. iMeet is a unique community devoted to the meetings and incentive industry. And following this event, they've created a private community in iMeet which will serve this particular group of participants. They can network among themselves. You can view sponsorship collateral material. You'll have access to the recording of the program and, in general, keep the conversation going. Within a few days of the program, each attendee will receive an email from iMeet with login instructions which will include automatic inclusion in this private community. Of course, we're encouraging everyone to participate and keep the dialogue going. It'll be great fun, and we'll remind you again at the end of the program. Also, we have an opportunity for you to participate in various polls which will give the panel and myself a better understanding as to the expertise and some of the background of our participants for this event from around the world. The panel is with us, and you can see them hopefully on your screens by now. Let's meet the panel. First up, I'd like to introduce you to Fiona Knight. Fiona is owner of Fiona Knight Consulting Services, and she's based in Toronto, Canada. Fiona, welcome, and please say a few words. Fiona.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be part of this inaugural webinar, and I'd like to give a quick thanks to the Marriott Hotels of Niagara. This is really Niagara Falls behind me, and so to illustrate the international events that I participate in, I'm as close to the border between Canada and the US as I can physically get. So thank you. Thank you for including me in the panel.
Glad you're with us, Fiona. James LAVALLE. James is Manager of Conventions, Exhibitions, and Corporate Events, Hong Kong Tourist Board in the United States. James, welcome. Thanks. And thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Virginia. Again, like Fiona said, it's an honor and a pleasure to be part of this inaugural event, and I hope that we have some very spirited discussion and some great questions at the end regarding exotic and international locations and why and how to conduct programs there.
Thanks, James. And we have next with us Jorge Rubio. Jorge is Manager of Conventions, is the Director of the Spain National Tourist Office, Chicago branch here in the United States. Welcome, Jorge. I'm so glad that you're with us, and please say a few words.
Thank you, Virginia. Thank you, Prevue and iMeet, for giving us this amazing opportunity. Our office in Chicago is responsible for all the marketing in the MICE industry here in USA, and we are willing to work with all of you because we are here in Chicago only responsible for the MICE industry. Thank you, Virginia, again.
Thank you, Jorge. And I'd just like to remind everybody that we have as our sponsors today both Hong Kong and Spain, and we're glad to have them with us. Let's get started with our first poll because that'll help us get a feel for who's out there in our audience. In order to help us, give us an idea as to your expertise in the international arena. Do you feel that you're just beginning in the international arena? You haven't actually launched a program, a meeting, or an incentive? Do you feel sort of at the intermediate level, or are you a seasoned pro? You've got your bag packed, your shoes ready to go, and you're off. We've got some responses coming in, and those of you in the audience can probably see those coming in. We don't have too many that are new to the international meetings industry. We're about 50-50 between some veteran experience and seasoned veteran. So that's good to know, and that helps our panelists and myself position questions and and move into some more depth as we have our program here. One of the questions that comes up quite often is, how do you engage best with a country? Through a DMC or through a national tourist office, or both? And in setting up those relationships, how best to nurture those forward? Let's start with Fiona. You're sitting there on the border of two countries, and you also are our anchor meeting planner on our panel, and we'd love for you to have your comments on that.
Well, as most of you know, if you've done these events before, it's always a team with the event planner that puts on an event in any destination, but particularly in an international destination. You might use a local visitors bureau or a tourism office. You might work with the actual event venue if you are lucky enough to have relationships in individual sites that you've used before. Or through organizations such as Meeting Planners International or the International Special Events Society. You can find out quite quickly contacts in the location that you need to start networking with. I usually start out on international events between 6 and 12 months before any event takes place. That gives you some networking time and some time to put in place those logistical challenges that you might have going out of your home country. But definitely don't work alone. There are lots of networks there to help you, and lots of on-site folks that will help you and are there to help you and are happy to do so.
Fiona, once you set those initial relationships into play, are those that those relationships situations that you encourage using over and over again, or do you branch out from there to bring in?
It really depends. It really depends. As you know, we have an industry where people do move from location to location, from supplier to supplier. I tend to nurture some of the relationships I've had for nearly 20 years of doing business internationally. But some, again, when your clients are asking you to go to new and further expand your horizons, I usually get client recommendations, and also I always have a budget to work within. So some of those parameters are set for you, but usually I have a pretty good sense of at least who to first contact, and then they can maybe refer on to other suppliers and other assistants for planning the event.
Thanks, Fiona. Let's get the perspective on the same question from the countryside. Let's start with James. Any comments about working with tourist boards and CVBs and the like? James?
Virginia, I encourage all planners to use all the resources, all the tools in their toolkit. We think we provide a very specific service as a destination marketing organization, just like a DMC provides a very specific service in the hotel industry as well. And dependent upon your familiarity with the destination you're picking, where you go first may be different. If it's strictly an on-site meeting, you may go to the hotel industry first to seek out what the possibilities are, and then work with a destination marketing organization to cull down a list to get some feedback on properties that might be bidding on the event that they're not familiar with. If it's a destination that you go to every year, you may just seek out the destination marketing organization for, many of us offer a range of products, privileges, and services to incoming groups just to enhance programs. If you're a comprehensive incentive, you may certainly want to go to a DMC because it's not just about destination, but it's about experiences and maybe about cultural immersion. You want to know what the possibilities are in a range of different destinations. But as a National Tourist Office, we like to provide the best possible referrals, recommendations, and unbiased counsel that we can to our customers or the distributors that we work with, because we want to make sure that they maximize their experience on site so that they come back or they bring other clients back to our destination. And obviously, since we only have one destination to be an expert in, and an average planner has an entire globe to do so, we honestly believe that we can provide some really valuable counsel.
Thank you, James. Great insight. Jorge, likewise, from your perspective, working with tourist boards and CVBs and so on and so forth, any insights that you could share with our participants?
I agree with James because it depends on the different programs and different experience of the meeting planners here in USA that they have in our country, specifically in Spain. We have a very good relation with all the convention bureaus in Spain, more than 50 convention bureaus. All these convention bureaus are public and private partnership, and we can provide the request for information, the request for proposal, and we drive to the right convention bureau like Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia, Bilbao, and they can give you the best answer for your proposal, or the best answer for your information request. And that's the way. You have an office here in Chicago, the Tourist Office of Spain in Chicago, and I think if you don't have any kind of experience in our country, the first step for you maybe it's a good idea to contact directly to our office.
Thank you, Jorge.
Thank you.
One of the things I've sort of gathered from all of you, though, is that referrals and references are an important part of launching international activities, especially as you move into more exotic locales. Fiona, any further comments on that?
Yeah, again, the logistics for each destination around the globe vary greatly. So it helps, I find, if you haven't actually done a site visit yourself, that you're there with someone on the ground that knows, you know, what the airport looks like that week, not a year ago. And if you're, usually my events are around a specific cultural event. For example, I did events in London for the Olympics this year. I was lucky enough to have been, you know, born and raised in that particular city, so I was quite well networked. But even going across for incentives to Spain or into France and Holland, you need to make sure that your information is up to date. And by keeping I go to Incentive Works in Toronto every August, which has a lot of global incentive and travel suppliers, to keep those one-on-one relationships fresh and to find out what's new and what's different. And I also, while I'm planning events, try to go to as many different sites as I can when new airports are being opened, or in Vancouver when the new convention center was opened, just to keep abreast of what those new facilities look like, what they can handle, and that type of thing. So again, very important to keep your connections fresh and up to date, and also to use your associations and use the connections that you have to make sure that your information is current. Also on the other side, I get a lot of input and help from the different passport offices, consulates, those types of things, people that have to arrange visas. All of those contacts are very useful as well to find out what might be going on politically or culturally within that location that your meetings folks may not know.
Let me key off of that for a little bit. And how do you prepare your client for a foreign destination? And then also, how do you prepare the attendees for going to a particular destination? James, any thoughts about that? You've worked on many aspects of the industry, and then we'll come back to Jorge and Fiona.
Well, preparing a client for an international destination, it's interesting because we're talking about exotic destinations. And for those of us who've been around since the 80s, I'm showing my age there, maybe Hong Kong doesn't seem like such an exotic destination, but we have a new generation of planners coming through, and for them it could very well be. But in either way, planners are selling destinations around the world. As Fiona was intimating, she can't be right on top of everything that's happening in every destination around the world. So we keep a fairly comprehensive set of information on our website that assists planners or leisure visitors on customs. And I don't mean customs as in coming through customs, I mean in acclimating to the destination. We can be fairly simple for most because we're predominantly English speaking, but I imagine that it's very important, as if you're not an English speaking destination, to also, you know, provide a range of information on how to get around without speaking the language, where best to turn, etc. As far as visitors go, we provide each of the visitors on any MICE program, as part of our Hong Kong Rewards program, a welcome kit. Maps, instructions, language books, and some shopping and dining discounts so they can easily acclimate to the destination, understand the public transportation system, understand how to get around by cab. But from a planner perspective, I think it's more important to talk about the simplicity or lack thereof, depending on destination, of how to plan a program in your specific destination and how you can offer the tools and services to make that as easy as possible, even in the most exotic of locales.
How important is knowing a few phrases of whatever language it might be for a destination that you may be going to? Hong Kong has a tremendous English base as well as Chinese and other international members of the community. James, any thoughts on that?
Well, it's kind of hard for me to say because I always push English is the language of business and service, and especially on our planner base, there's really not much of a language not much of a language barrier, but I'm sure Jorge would have a different story to tell. And before Hong Kong, I was with Australia, and they definitely speak a different language, but people tended to pick up on it pretty quick.
I found that in some places hand language is pretty good, but you have to be careful about the type of expressions you use with your hands.
No doubt.
And it varies widely from country to country and continent to continent. Jorge, any thoughts?
Yeah, in our country, English language is widely spoken in the tourism industry. But the Spanish is spoken, and also in the different regions we have different languages too, like Catalan or like the Basques, and it's different culture, and we try to educate the planner here and try to send them as much information as we have, like maps, different brochures. Or Spanish is rich in culture with different custom and tradition, and also regarding the visas, in case they need different nationalities in the same group, we can advise the planners for this kind of the visa requirement in our country. And also very important in our country is times of the time days of meals in Spain, because we have different custom in our country. We start our lunch maybe at 3, not at 12 or noon, or even the dinner. And this is something a surprise for the clients normally. And we try to advise, and we try to get informed the planners just to follow this information to their clients.
For Americans, sometimes waiting till 3, they get pretty hungry, and so those break periods in formal meetings become very important, and for informal meetings, providing some type of nourishment midday before that 3 o'clock becomes significant. And for planners to know that in their planning process for an international meeting, I think is pretty significant, because you want to keep your attendees in tip-top shape if you possibly can. Fiona, any thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Wherever I am, food goes with me. So food and drink are always widely available where I plan, hopefully. And usually, if there's a cultural event like a siesta, I would encourage all my clients to fully participate in that. You can plan into the evening. You can start much earlier, given the time difference. People are usually up and lively early in the morning sometimes, depending on where they're coming from. But I always try and incorporate the culture of the location. Otherwise, you might as well have your event in Chicago. If you're not going to change anything or do anything differently, there's not really much point in exploring another culture along with another location. So yes, just keep people well moisturized, well nourished, and they'll be happy all through, no matter where they are in the world.
What's one of the best ways to find out about festivals and events in a particular country or community that you're headed to? James or Jorge?
Go ahead.
Well, I think most of us, as far as destination marketing organizations, keep a comprehensive calendar of events, and it's not just for the meetings industry. It's not just about cultural events. I mean, obviously they're integral to a lot of incentive programs. We encourage, we encourage corporations to consider coming to Hong Kong for Chinese New Year, but we also keep a comprehensive convention and meetings calendar so that you understand peak seasonality, and you can utilize that information that's held on our website to make sure that you're coming to our destination at the right time of year for a rate or activity, depending upon what you're looking for. I'm sure most of the destinations do the same. Excuse me?
To create that right balance.
Exactly.
For the client, yeah, and the participant for that.
Exactly.
Jorge, any comments?
We have in our main portal, Spain.info, all kind of special agenda for all the festivities and all the cultural events in our country. And we try to promote together with the regional tourism, and we have the most known festivals or festivities in our country, like the Tenerife Carnival, the Horse Fair in Jerez de la Frontera, the Holy Week in Seville, the April Fair, the Running of the Bulls in Pamplona, or even another one like the San Sebastian International Film Festival. We have plenty of information and a huge calendar of events, and you can match this calendar as Fiona is talking about, and you can try to match your programs according to this calendar to encourage your clients to go and visit and enjoy these special festivities we have.
I'd like to remind the audience that you can submit any questions that you might like to ask of the panel in your question and answer field, so feel free to write those out at any time. And let's take our second poll. What, as participants, has been your biggest challenge in creating meetings and incentive or MICE events? Buying into the concept, contracts in the country, logistics and operation, or other. Logistics and operation, off the chart, 100%. And I think the reason for that is multiple. It's you're working with different customs and expectations on both sides of the fence, et cetera, et cetera. Fiona, you've had a great deal of experience in this area. Can you talk a little bit about the logistics and operational aspects of putting together an international meeting? And Hong Kong and Spain are fabulous destinations. They've been well on the radar for a lot of folks. There are also some that are less so, but now are becoming more on the radar, exotic places, for instance, in Far East, Southeast Asia or South America and wherever in the world, which makes things perhaps even more complicated. Fiona?
Well, I think it falls into different categories. I deal a lot where the actual participants are coming from different countries. So not only am I dealing with flights in from one particular area, I may be dealing with flights in from all over the world. So looking for a destination where there are a lot of direct flights, where there may be a transportation link or hub associated with that city or with that area, that's important consideration for me and my clients. Again, I tend to go with pre-organized large cultural events. So we know the dates pretty much 3 or 4 years out, and we can plan hotel accommodations, travel logistics, and set up with sites pretty much 2 or 3 years out in some cases. That helps a lot, but there are always on-site logistical nightmares, and that's a whole other webinar that people might not want to listen to, but I can send you tips and tricks on that individually afterwards. Something, you know, Murphy's Law, something will always not go as planned, and so it does help to have technical backup and even logistical backup, even to move to another. I'm sure people that were planning in the New York area in the last month or so have had chances to change locations or do things virtually instead of on site. Those types of things are always included in our planning. But again, some things you just learn through trial and error and experience, and you cannot plan for. For instance, we were stuck in Miami 2 days before Katrina and no flights were leaving. So we rented a big van and put the equipment in the van and drove the van. So there are things that you can plan ahead of time, but there are also things that you just have to learn from experience and on the fly deal with as they happen to you.
One of the questions that's come up is, selling some of these areas, given the economic pressures that companies and organizations are facing in the world economic climate. Any thoughts about that, James and Jorge?
I might defer to our friend from Spain on that question, being that he's more at the center of some of those economic challenges.
Yeah.
Jorge?
Yeah, we are in the center of the economical challenge in Europe, but it's a surprise for us because in this year, in the current year, 2012, we are growing a lot in terms of our international tourism, and also we are still being the third country in the world in terms of international conference, according to ICA. And we are not seeing a lot of pressure in terms of trying to downsize the prices of the groups, because the groups are dealing in advance, 2 or 3 years in advance. And our cities like Madrid, Barcelona, that are in the top ranks, in the number 3, number 6 in that rank, in the ICA rank, and they are preparing these big events and with the convention bureaus more than 2 years in advance. So far we are not seeing that kind of pressure. Maybe in the small cities, in a small destination for incentives, they have a very good opportunities, but these kind of big cities are still having a very huge demand.
Speaking of economic issues, and given some of the variables that we're now facing, and you're dealing, Fiona, years in advance, do you recommend handling your budgeting and then payment in dollars, in local currency? How do you handle transfers, electronically, et cetera, et cetera? Fiona.
Again, it depends on your client and where your client is situated and the budgets that they're working with. The American dollar is still currency that we most often deal with, even in Canada, even though the Canadian dollar is stronger at some points in history than the American dollar, and also with the euro. Again, depending on where my client base is, I would always book those secure locations and suppliers earlier rather than later. That gives you some sort of security that A, they're booked, and B, they're paid for. So currency fluctuations aside, which you may be dealing with, a significant dip in the currency 2 years from now, or a significant rise, it really doesn't make a difference to our business. We kind of keep going no matter what those fluctuations are, and a good supplier rate is a good supplier rate, regardless of what currency you're paying in. Again, it's the relationship with the suppliers. I'm more concerned that the reliability of that supplier relationship and that it fits within my client's budget. Aside from that, then I don't really matter what currency the invoices are coming in. We'll figure it out.
So you don't put a rider in a contract or whatever that says if it drops 50%, we make a change or adjustment?
It depends again on how much time out you're doing and what the budget is for that particular client. Some clients I deal with are booking international venues every year or twice a year. Some only book every 4 or 5 years or even every 10 years. So it really does depend on the individual event, and in something like the World Cup of Soccer or the Olympics, you want to secure that venue ahead of time, and that's the important thing, is that you're booked and you're secured in that venue rather than the rider for what that's going to cost you in the actual year of the event. So,
James, do you have any follow-up on that, or?
Well, again, it's a subject matter that we're not very attuned to, being that there is no currency fluctuation between the Hong Kong dollar and the U.S. dollar. The Hong Kong dollar is pegged to the U.S. dollar, but That stated, I think, most suppliers are going to push for a local currency payment, and most planners are going to push for their local currency. And perchance to work with a national sales office, you may actually have a little bit more leverage as a planner than working direct with the hotel, but your negotiating might not be as strong. So there's pluses and minuses to all those things. But as far as, it's a small world, and nowadays, and after all, and global payments are getting simpler and simpler all the time. So it's just a matter of mitigating risk when you're negotiating how your payment terms and what your currencies are going to be.
Thanks, James. Jorge, you may have a unique perspective. Any comments quickly, and then I've got some other questions that are coming in.
No, I think everything was told in that area.
Let me ask you then, Jorge. We'll start with you, because we've had a question about medical services, and should there be a medical emergency in a country. Some countries have certain programs for international visitors and so on. Any thoughts on that from your perspective, Jorge, in Spain?
In Spain, our recommendation always is to deal, or you have in advance your own insurance for your country, specifically from USA. But our health system is a very well known and very recognized, very good health system we have. But as I'm telling, I think it's very recommendable to have an insurance plan before coming to our country.
Some countries in Central America, South America have insurance policies that are included for groups. We've actually had some experience with this, and one of the things that we do, and Fiona, you may have some comments, is before we lock into everything on a site for a meeting or an incentive, we do identify hospitals and contacts for medical emergencies, as well as we make sure that all the attendees have a reference should we need it to contact if the person in question is not available or coherent for that matter. Fiona?
Yes, I have a slightly different area of client base, which is athletics and sports injuries and physiotherapists. So sometimes we even bring a medical team or along with us, or we definitely know where the specialists are in the area. And also I concur that if you're going to an area you haven't been before and you're not completely sure of the local medical insurance, a group insurance for that particular event is very much it assists you to get to the right people quickly, because usually it's an emergency. I've had people heart attacks or various different things, thrombosis, you name it, we've encountered it. So there's usually something, if it's like a mass food poisoning, for example, which yes, I've experienced on a couple of occasions, that might be a slightly different thing that you're planning for, but usually you want to make sure that A, your individual participants have their individual insurance, because everyone has different healthcare history, and B, that you have some sort of group plan on site to cover those emergencies that might happen.
James, because of the English as business language in Hong Kong, any thoughts on the medical and also working with your DMC for that matter in identifying hospitals, etc.?
Well, certainly,
be needed.
On the insurance side, I think most local planners would have travel insurance companies here in the U.S. that they probably work with, or at least assess need with. In the local market, yeah, I think a DMC is if you're working with one, and even your hotel partner, if not, are ideal sources of information for this, certainly for knowing where the nearest healthcare providers are, getting a feel for things. One thing I find with international travelers, and it's not true everywhere, but it's true in a lot of places in the world, is that, when you're traveling internationally, you'll be pretty astounded at how inexpensive healthcare is in a lot of places that have effective, well, I'm not going to get political on election day, so we won't go there. But, however, I always make sure when I have people coming over with me on a FAMSA that I have their insurance company, their emergency contact, any health issues that they have outstanding, and preparation is obviously of utmost importance. But when I've had issues in our destination, it's a very the private hospitals are easy to get into, quick service, and I've had people who've broken a foot and been in the hospital, seen by 3 doctors, had an x-ray, given 3 prescription drugs, and walked out with an $80 bill. And I was pretty amazed by that.
Wow.
But that's kind of the rule in Hong Kong because it's the nature. So it's important to understand what, how healthcare is provided for in the destination that you're going to, because that may really help you assess what the risk is.
The other thing I should mention, in some locales around the world now, some of the mainline U.S. hospitals have an affiliation with hospitals in various countries, and that's helpful to know in advance. And obviously, the farther in advance you're setting up a meeting or incentive, the better it is to work out some of those logistics. Let's move over to some of the fun aspects, and that's return on investment and return on experience, because the new generations, especially, everybody likes to experience, but more so with the younger generations, it's all about the experience. And one of the questions that's just come in, and they asked us specifically of Hong Kong and Spain, is they're popular destinations. How do you keep them fresh for planners who are considering them, and exotic for attendees, and experiential? James or Jorge, you want to take a crack at this one?
Certainly. Jorge, you want to go first?
Okay, no problem. Thank you,
No
James.
worries.
Our country, we have a huge variety of different activities you can have in our country, from whale watching of the coast of Tenerife, the paella cooking in Valencia. You can participate in a separate barrier front, seeing the running of the bulls, or even you can recreate the well-known the Barber of Seville, where in the Plaza de España in the middle of Seville is transformed with decoration and converting become as an opera scene with barber chairs and barbers that pretend to shave their clients. The clients are the participants of this specific group, or to recreate the world famous Carnival of Tenerife in the middle of, during the night in a beach or in a hotel, and with different music, customs, participants, recreating that specific carnival. We have plenty of different opportunities in our country, because every small city, every region has his own tradition, his own festivities, and everything is possible.
So there's a way to really engage the participants in a local aspect of the celebration or culture.
Yeah, it's like experience or a cultural immersion, and where you can recreate some specific festivity or just to participate within
James,
that specific.
Thank you, Jorge. James, any comments?
Thank you.
Well, I'm kind of, again, on the polar opposite of Jorge. He has 50 different convention bureaus, each offering a unique range of products, experiences, and services. And while we consider ourselves a national tourist organization, we're also a convention and visitors bureau, and Hong Kong is pretty much mostly recognized as the city itself, although it does encapsulate a larger area than that. So truer to the question as it was answered is how do we refresh Hong Kong and the products and services we offer? I mentioned earlier that, for those of us who've been in the industry for 20 years, Hong Kong used to be the number 1, 2, or 3 international incentive destination out of the U.S. year after year after year through the 80s and 90s. And that's actually a big barrier for us, because I'll talk to a planner or I'll talk to a client. They say, well, we did Hong Kong, 20 years ago. And my answer to that is, yes, you've been there, but you haven't done that, because back then the product was about luxury, shopping, dining, and urban experience that really didn't even barely expose the culture of the local people, the culture of the destination. In fact, most events were held in hotel ballrooms. And now it's exactly the opposite. People want to immerse themselves in the local culture. We work with our DMCs to develop products that bring people further afield in the destination, maybe to some of our farther off islands to visit unique fishing villages. Maybe it's participating in some of the activities that are unique to the Chinese culture and their healthy living, be it Tai Chi classes and visits to apothecaries, which is very Chinese apothecaries who use traditional medicines rather than pharmaceuticals. That's actually very popular with the pharma industry. It could be learning more about tea in a Zen garden in the middle of the city. It could be going out to the Big Buddha. I think that what people want out of their programs now is much more experiential and much more immersive than what it was at our peak. So we just have to work with the product suppliers, especially the DMCs and the attractions, to make sure that we're constantly modifying not just the way we present product, but also in developing new products and new experiences that actually allow visitors to immerse themselves in the culture. Because even a meeting that's going to be on site in a hotel 85% of the time is going to want to take advantage of, as Fiona said, I think right up front, the destination to some extent, or else you might as well be anywhere else in the world.
We're going to start wrapping this up, but one of the other things to consider is age appropriate. If you have a young group, one of the fun things we've done is dragon boat races, and it becomes a great team building activity for younger participants. Fiona, any quick comments?
Just that I'm now doing working with clients that I've worked with for many years. So this time around at the Olympics, we worked with historic royal palaces, and so we did Cyclemania. So we had a historic, you're in a royal palace that King Henry VIII chopped his, the wives' heads off 500 or 600 years ago. You're seeing a brand new athletic Olympic time trial for cycling, and you're having a meal, and it's all experiential together. So I don't think I can top, a men's heptathlon and Buckingham Palace, but I will try in the next few years. But that's what we did this year.
Thank you so much. I want to thank the participants. I want to remind you that iMeet will extend this activity after the program. Fiona Knight, thank you, owner of Knight Consulting Services based in Toronto, Canada. James LaValle, manager, conventions, exhibits, and corporate events, Hong Kong Tourist Board and USA. And Jorge Rubio, director, Spain National Tourist Office, Chicago branch. We want to invite you to join us Thursday, November 29th for Redefining the Luxury Experience in the Age of Image Consciousness. So keep that in mind. Once again, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you later on. Bye-bye. Successful meetings.